the world lost your creative partner, Steve Jobs, who you referred to as the most inquisitive human I have ever met. And I read that amazing tribute that you wrote to him recently in the Wall Street Journal. So what do you miss most about him? The conversations, the person, the creativity?
Yeah, it's been an interesting process, and I'm sure it's one that many of us can relate to. I think perhaps rather naively, I thought my sense of Steve, when I remember him and think about him, which is pretty much every day, I thought my sense of him would remain somehow inviolate and stable. And what surprised me is, as I think about him, my sense of him, my sense of what his contribution truly was, has grown and has evolved. And I think that's a comment on a number of things. I think not least the sort of the current situation and context that we've been living through in the last few years. But I think where I have seen this shift in my own sense and my own remembering of him was less about his achievement, less about his, the products of his process, but it's become more and more about how he worked and the values and the priorities that he had in his working. And so, as I described, I've never met anybody more truly curious, more inquisitive than Steve. And what, I mean, those are easy words and they can be used fairly glibly, but he was constantly questioning. He wasn't defined by anybody else's dogma. There was this relish, this celebration of being surprised, even if the surprise actually meant that he was wrong. He was far more interested in the learning than being right. And it was that love of and that almost childlike wonder of discovering and questioning. But I think with some space, I realize, and this has influenced me so very much, I think it's very easy to think, well, that can just be an innate personality trait, to be curious. And over the last sort of decade or so, I've become increasingly aware of actually just how much intention is required. If you don't want to just fit in to, I guess, the status quo, or just fit in a nice, polite, convenient way, that large groups of people tend to sort of push you towards. And I've become more and more aware of the intention, the resolve and the determination to be truly curious, to be truly questioning. I think what happens is that when we're in a group of people, we tend to want to talk about what's known because it's much easier to have a polite conversation. I don't think most people, I think, don't relish confrontation, and they want to establish some sort of connection with other people. And that's very hard to do in a large group if what you're talking about is partial and tentative. If it's just a nebulous, fragile idea, that's a much more difficult conversation than talking about the problem. Because I think the thing with problems, by definition, a problem is understood. And so, of course, people want to talk about what they understand. And so generally the problem consumes the oxygen. It takes all of the attention. And I am more and more struck by how much energy and effort that he put in to encouraging people to be comfortable talking about what's tentative and partial, and that's ideas. And his just innate respect and reverence for the creative process was extraordinary. And I don't know, the older I get, the more important both the contribution and, I don't know, the sort of the moral imperative around creating seems to, personally seems to be the case. And so, yeah, I am particularly mindful of just his attitudes and his thinking, perhaps more than the predictable achievements.